When you're going through life with a big abandonment wound in your heart, it can be so painful to lose a relationship that you will do anything, you'll put up with anything, rationalize anything, believe anything to find a way to explain to yourself why someone leaving isn't really leaving. You think to yourself, oh, it's a mental health problem, it's a mistake. And this kind of thinking is so common for people who were left as children. Either your parent physically left you, or they left you emotionally because they were addicted, or they had alcoholism, or they were depressed, or they were caught up in their own difficulties so much that they couldn't really see and hear you and feel the reality of your precious child self and what you needed. So you got good at tolerating that. And this is a big way that trauma gets passed from generation to generation, by the way. So I got a letter this week from someone I'll call Frank, and he writes, this is kind of a long letter. I'm sharing it with you. There were 3 stages. I had to keep asking questions, and it's interesting how the information unfolds. So I'm going to share it all with you. Frank writes, Dear Fairy, I myself definitely have some CPTSD issues. I had an alcoholic mother, and as an adult have been a definite rescuer. Circling here with my pencil. A crisis in my marriage has brought my attention to these issues. So I'll circle things that I want to come back to after we just read through it. We're going to read through it one time, and I'll see if I can help you, Frank. My wife had a way worse childhood. She has left to chase a limerent object. That's a person who someone is limerent over, kind of obsessed in a fantasy realm, but not a real realm. She has left to chase a limerent object and moved in with him. She won't initiate divorce, and she's told her good friend that she hopes one day maybe we can work it out. In reality, the only thing stopping that is she won't stop. I think she's heavily caught in the fantasy. Do I continue to wait? Am I just acting out my own childhood by sticking around, waiting for her to return? We have 4 kids, and I hate to divorce and formally break up the family. But is that the wake-up call she needs to shake her from the fantasy? I don't want to be a slave to my own trauma, but I can't seem to just really be done with the relationship. I've already waited 6 months. So I asked Frank, I said, well, tell me more. This is intriguing, but I need to know more. Where are your kids, and what does your wife say about the possibility of return? So he says there's 4 kids. They're now splitting custody 50-50. And yes, unfortunately, he says, this man has taken a role in the kid's life. We went to a marriage workshop at the beginning of the year designed for marriages in this scenario, and they actually teach about limerence, so it's where I first learned about it. They teach that while your spouse is limerent, they're not going to be rational at all, that in addition to this, what they're doing likely goes against all their values. This being the case, they find themselves in major cognitive dissonance and become very confused. This has been her to a T. When you ask her, it is a lot of, I don't know, which from my coaching with the previous organization is very common. They also tend to vilify the spouse, me, to justify their actions, which she did badly in the beginning. She also has complained about just following her heart, but not knowing what her values really are anymore. I've noticed you mentioned it's very common with CPTSD, but it's common in limerence because they're trying to justify their actions due to the immense amount of cognitive dissonance they're in. When I kind of pushed for divorce, she was willing to acquiesce, but I pushed her specifically wanting to know what she thought because she has accused me all these years of doing whatever I wanted, and she knew she didn't make her voice heard. So I pushed back and asked what she wanted. She said she didn't want to string me along, but that she's on a journey right now and feels like she needs to see it through. So cryptically, she's saying, I wish you'd hold on. She's made some efforts to establish more of a friendship with me. Considering a few months ago, she said I was a monster that was controlling and, quote, abusive, it is a large about face. So there are small signs that she's warming up a little. Another is that she had agreed to participate in a Bible study with an old friend, long distance, and she's even recently told me she started reading her Bible again and praying more. We used to be pretty strong in our faith, and during and before this, we both had kind of walked away. At the same time, she's not taking discernible and credible actions to repair our relationship. She continues to live most of her life as though there is no thought of returning. There are times I feel like she is simply having her cake and eating it too, keeping me on the back burner. This isn't who I've known my wife to be all these years. At the same time, none of this is. My wife used to be the most rigid and planned out person. In fact, her hobby is decorating happy planners with stickers and stuff. Yet when asked about the future, she says, I don't really have a plan, but I think that's kind of the point for me to figure it out as I go. It's tough because this organization educates that limerence will eventually end. They'll come out of the fog and may realize what a mess they've made of their life. And I think you've done the best I've seen at describing the fantasy that limerence is, the drug that it is. My wife never wanted to be like the addicts in her family. Sadly, she is hooked on the guy, and you can tell she's falling apart. I love my family. I love my kids. I never wanted them to have a broken home. Yeah. I'm someone that is committed to being the best person I can be. I struggle immensely because I don't want to let my kids down. They miss their mom, even though they see her half the time. My wife used to stay at home and even homeschool the kids, so it's a major hole in their life. At the same time, I don't want to just be a mindless slave to my past and cling to a dead relationship. So I wrote to Frank again at that point because what had caught my ear is that she said she accused him of being abusive, and I'm like, why does she say that? So he gave me a little more background. He said, we've been together 15 years, married for 12. We have 4 kids, and she has most of her life been a stay-at-home mom and even homeschooled the kids. When we were first married, you see, it's sort of like unfolding, isn't it? When we were first married, during our first year, she became very depressed and abused some of her prescription pills and actually had an affair that was limited to a couple of times. She came clean with me pretty early on, and I forgave her, chalking it up to her deep depression and young, foolish behavior. After that, she threw herself into our faith and became an excellent mother. She cared for our kids and was probably, looking back, terribly self-sacrificial, never knowing when to stop or when to indulge in self-care. We also struggled financially many years, and so life has been stressful without a doubt. Fast forward to about a year ago, and we both, due to COVID, had stopped being active in our faith. She expressed concern and wanted me to take our faith more seriously. She warned me that she feared, without it, things would fall apart. I didn't realize how dependent she was on it for a sense of values and purpose. Shortly thereafter, we made a regretful decision to experiment in our marriage with a threesome, and this is how she met this other guy. This came out rather late in the letter writing process. We were in such a great place at that time that I wasn't threatened in the least. By the time I realized how bad it was too late, and she was in the grips of limerence. Earlier this year, she moved out of our home. She lives with the guy. They got together. We split custody. By all accounts, this guy is not exactly a better choice, but she says her relationship is different with him, and they work well together. He's the complete opposite of me in many ways, and I know he, too, has a porn addiction. 2? Okay. It feels as if there are 2 addicts together having their own way. She's pretty depressed, suffering from an increased number of panic attacks, and has taken up smoking as well as gained quite a bit of weight. She's very vague about the future and doesn't push for divorce. For now, she's living each day for herself. She won't discuss our relationship with me and is full of more I don't know, which I'm told can be her cognitive dissonance. I want to save my family, but I fear I'm simply acting out of my pattern of saving my alcoholic mother as a child by waiting around for my wife. This whole thing has brought to light that we both had a pretty codependent relationship with each other, and I've worked on myself the last 6 months to fix these problems. I love my wife dearly, but she has hurt me considerably. I know forgiveness is possible. Trust can be rebuilt, but am I just hanging on because it's what love is to me? Am I just fitting myself to crap? What's the healthy thing to do? I'm honestly confused, and I keep going back and forth. I hate the idea of not having my kids full-time, separate holidays, etc., but is it inevitable? And then I asked Frank what he thought was hard for her. Why did she say she left? And he said, I would say the controlling and abusive aspect of the relationship that she refers to were mostly in light of codependency. as the ways you'd expect a rescuing partner who kind of takes on a parental role in a relationship. I was overly critical and not empathic enough, and I would say to some of her issues through the years, they were all more covert issues of control, and some was likely backed up by my super conservative religious background. The husband is head of the household and that whole thing. This was amplified by the fact that she is super avoidant, which I didn't know. So any issues she had through the years, she never spoke up about. I've felt to always be a person that if you confront me, I'm willing to consider change. I look back, though, and I realize I have definitely been super defensive and would often blame shift issues in the past, too. I really struggled at needing to be right about many things. I'm sure it made her feel crazy at times. Okay? Likewise, I'd say for many years I felt super manipulated. My brother-in-law, who lived with us for several years, told me he felt like my wife would often play the victim and pout until she got her way. So I feel like we both had our super unhealthy ways of getting what we wanted. But by and large, I thought we were pretty happy. There was never physical abuse and never anything really purposely done to hurt each other. It was more just shitty communication patterns and stuff from our families of origin, really. In a nutshell, I can see that I've been overly focused on myself through these years and should have been more insistent on taking in her perspective and at times deferring to her to make a decision even if she was reluctant. I definitely have carried over really toxic communication strategies from my childhood too that I've worked to untangle. I use things like nonviolent communication, which is a technique to better handle conflict. I've allowed my emotional dysregulation to run the show for many years and made many life decisions based far more on these emotions that are from a really crappy framework. This has caused me to constantly change my mind, be difficult to criticize, and often selfish. I so related to having no emotions during really bad times, and so I'd lack proper empathy and support. I have read several books on codependency and have worked to stop being the fixer and advice giver in life. I've dramatically reduced the behaviors in the last 6 months. I have attended CODA and my own therapy. I've apologized for anything and everything I recognize I've done, perhaps too much, and I've asked for forgiveness. I've accepted my lack of control and ability to only change myself and have reacquainted myself with my faith in a much healthier and less judgmental manner. Can you help? Frank. Okay. Frank, my goodness, this is a really tough situation. I read this whole letter with all the parts of it because I think it's such a strong example of how complicated life can be, how there's no easy answer, how we suffer through these things because we're human. But I'm going to try. Let's see if I can help shed some insight for you. So you wrote, you had an alcoholic mother. I did too, and I just relate to that. You've been a definite rescuer. And you really, the crisis in your marriage has brought that out. Your wife had an even worse thing. You mentioned she had addicts in her family. And she has left you for what you call a limerent object and moved in with him. And she won't initiate divorce. And she's told her friend that she hopes it might work out. And you were wondering, do I continue to wait? Now, this is interesting. I expect in the comments we're going to have two camps. And one's going to say, stick it out. And one's going to say, leave. And the reason we're going to see that is because it's a very complicated situation and it doesn't have an easy answer. I normally don't comment on the person who didn't write in, but I feel like I have a sense of what could be going on with her, so I'll be commenting on that a little bit. So you're splitting custody 50-50. You went to a marriage workshop at the beginning of the year when this whole thing first started, when she, I guess, first got limerent, and it was about limerence, and she agreed that's what was going on. They said don't make rash decisions. She did anyway. She moved out to live with this guy. So it was interesting because the first letter I got from you was very short, and somehow I detected like there's this brewing storm here, but you hadn't said what it is. And I don't know, I cannot kind of understand that. I'm really used to, as a person with trauma and drama in my life, I compartmentalized it. I didn't want everybody to see it, but I thought it was just kind of interesting when you wrote to me how much important detail was left out. And maybe you just needed to be asked. So I asked. We had several rounds of communication. And your answers made sense to me, but they all came as a surprise because it didn't. I was like, oh, that explains a lot. So, yeah, somebody who's limerent is not going to be rational. They will be in cognitive dissonance. They'll be confused. They'll blame you for what's going on. That all sounds about right. It's really trippy that she went to that workshop with you. So interesting that there is such a thing. And she went, but it just doesn't sound like her heart was in it, but she tried, or she was willing to go through the motions of trying. The feeling I get about her is that she's been doing that all her life, that has not been able to develop an identity or what she wants. I think that might be what's going on. And then when you ask her, she says a lot of, I don't know, I just don't know. And you were told that could be her cognitive dissonance. And that's just a funny way for saying, yeah, she doesn't know. She's unclear what she's feeling or doing. She just finds herself running away from home. Her actions speak louder than what her intentions are expressed to be. But also, keep in mind, she's trying not to hurt you. She probably has a horror of hurting you and how she's let you down and how it's affecting the kids. So she is probably putting the lightest spin on this possible. That doesn't mean I can read her mind, but just normally that's what a person does unless they really want to hurt you. And I'm not hearing that that was the case for either of you. But you said when I kind of pushed her for divorce, and I get it, you maybe tried to force a decision like, what is this? Are we getting divorced or are we getting back together? I need to know one way or the other. Very fair, okay, even if she couldn't say anything. And she said, you specifically wanted to know what she thought because she kept saying, I never got to weigh in. My feelings were never considered in all of this. So you were like, come on, let me know how you feel. I do want to know. And I'm proud of you that you were able to change that about the dynamic where you really kept opening up the space for her to say how she felt. It didn't get the answer you wanted, but you did it. And that's really good. That's a really good thing. She didn't want to string me along. She's on a journey right now, and it feels like she needs to see it through. So cryptically, you said, she's saying, I wish you'd hold on. Okay, so the key sign of limerence is that somebody is looking for signs. And so this is the interesting thing, Frank. I think you're in a bit of limerence. I don't think she is, and you know why? Because she's actually living with the guy. She may be in I don't know. I agree she's in kind of an altered state of some kind of trying to, we'll talk about her in a minute because it is speculation. But I just think that you looking for signs that what she really wants is to come back. It feels a little bit like you're looking at signs. You say later that none of her actions support, credible, consistent and credible action towards getting back together. When somebody has strayed and they want to get back together, what they would do if they were sincere about it is anything they had to do. They would just keep showing up. They would do everything that you've been doing. They would take the classes, read the books, see the therapist, try to come up with what was my part in it, what can I heal in myself. You've done an amazing job of that. I don't hear that she's doing that. I hear she's in a flight mode. She's running away. And just because it reflects an internal struggle or a trauma reaction, it doesn't mean it's not real. She really has run away. And that's the sad thing about this. You can't really explain that fact away with her trauma or limerence or anything. But the thing about limerence is once you're actually with somebody, limerence goes away because you're living with them. You can't really have a fantasy that everything would be great. What I've noticed is that people who are limerent, limerence, we're vulnerable to it if we were terribly neglected as kids and our lives suck. So I think that may have been what was happening with her. Her life was feeling empty. She had a terrible childhood. So a fantasy relationship where you just think, if we were together, oh my gosh, it would just be so amazing. Actually being together with anybody totally kills that. You go, whoa, what a disappointment, right? It's not like the fantasy. And a lot of people will avoid actual relationships with the person they're limerent over, at least on a subconscious level, because they know that real life would kill the fantasy that's keeping them going. But what that fantasy is doing is allowing a person to avoid the pain of their life and the difficult decisions they have to face. So whatever this is coming from, whatever you want to call it, she's being a terrible partner to you. She's just being a terrible partner to you. There's no answers. What she is to herself is one thing, what she is to you is another. What I hear you doing is abandoning yourself and hopping the fence and trying to figure her out, trying to excuse her actions, trying to create a bridge for her. And I don't blame you. Having 4 kids together is a serious thing. And of course you want to save the marriage, and I don't blame you for trying. But I would just say, I see you did do a lot of work on yourself. But I'm going to recommend to you, Frank, that you really get self-disciplined about focusing on your own side and not trying to make her see anything, not try to figure her out, not try to make her come back. Like, if she's going to do that, she will let you know. She will let you know. You don't have to do a thing. You can start focusing on your life and following the split custody agreement. I have a little concern about that. As a, previously single mom before, one thing that I noticed is that when you're separated but not divorced, you have one set of rights as a parent. When you're actually divorced, you have a different set. And when you're divorced, for example, and this is in my state, I don't know if it's absolutely true for everybody in the world here, when you're divorced, your spouse cannot take kids out of the country without your consent. So if there was any concern that she would run off with the kids or anything like that, I mean, it sounds like she's not in a position to, but just going to say, I would recommend you at least speak to a lawyer about this and find out about implications for parenting, money, spousal support, and all that, and not try to do this all emotionally. I think divorce is certainly like a possibility right now, and knowing the facts does nothing but helps you make a clear, a better decision for yourself, whether it's for or against divorce. I would not condemn you if you decided to wait longer on this one. It sounds like a crazy situation. What's the hurry? But I would like you and your kids to be legally protected for crazy shenanigans that might arise, because I don't know much about these other people, but it sounds not great. It doesn't sound great. I think it's really sad because the kids need contact with both of you. You're doing a great job at it. I know how half custody is not the same, but there are things you can do to make that as good as possible. But this was interesting, Frank. You said when you kind of push for divorce, and you pushed her wanting to know her opinion, she pushed back and she said she's on a journey, she needs to see it through. You thought she was cryptically saying, I want to come back. Maybe, but I don't think so. She's made some efforts to establish more of a friendship, which is good because you're co-parenting. And a few months ago, she thought you were a monster, you were controlling and abusive. And she's come around on that, so good. I think that it's a lot easier to deal with a bad dynamic when you're outside of it. So whatever pressure she felt in the relationship, even though she may have jumped out of the fire out of the frying pan and into the fire, at least she's out of the frying pan and she can see the frying pan, and maybe she's feeling less angry at you, and she's warming up a little bit. But another thing is that she's agreed to participate in a Bible study with an old friend, long distance. Yeah, that's secondhand knowledge or something. It's also long distance. It's an old friend. Maybe, sometimes if she has a pang of guilt or she wants to placate you, you said that you had a codependent two-way dynamic. That's the sort of thing she would say. Well, I'm looking, when I would guess you've probably said to her, but don't you realize this is morally wrong? And she'd be like, yeah, well, I'm going to a Bible study. I swear I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that. That just sounds like that kind of thing. Believe it when you see it, and don't even worry about what it is, because what matters is what she actually does, and what she's doing is staying with this other guy and not coming home. So this thing where you guys lost your faith, I just have so much compassion for you. Yeah, so that you kind of walked away from faith, and I think that's been happening for a lot of people, especially with the pandemic. And at the same time, she's not taking discernible and credible actions to repair, so there you have it. She continues to live most of her life as though there's no thought of returning. There's your sign if you want to look for signs. She's not acting like somebody who's returning, and that's really significant. You can let go, Frank. You know what? You can let go. You can stop trying to make anything happen. And if she does have it in her that she wants to come back and work it out with you, she's a lot more likely to do it when that space is just a nice neutral field without you hanging there waiting for her like, are you coming back? Are you coming back? Because it is like so clear. She was not able to be herself before. She was feeling pressured. She needs pressure off. Let her out. Just let her out. It won't do any harm. She's already gone. As a human being, and as your friend and as the mother of your kids, it just sounds like she's very lost right now. And she keeps saying the point of her doing this is, I don't have a plan. I'm trying to figure it out. You said she had this hobby. She had homeschooled the kids. She didn't work, and that tells me she has no source of income. I don't know about this guy, but she doesn't have a way to get some space without a guy because she has no money. I'm guessing. You guys had financial problems. She doesn't work. That's a terrible position for a person to be in. And, we've seen other letters like this. In fact, I'll put one at the end of this where a family was breaking down, kind of similar things. There was an infidelity. It kind of, snowballed. In that case, the woman had a career. In this case, her not having a career and homeschooling kids, If she was really young and everything just kind of happened, I just can really see this is what a lot of like my mom's generation went through, where there was this set of expectations from this culture you were in. You'd be the head of the household. She'd do the thing. No one ever asked what she said. She couldn't express what she wanted. She didn't know what she wanted. You know, I don't think it's good what she's doing, but I sure understand the need to just like get out and breathe and just be like, I don't know, I'm going to go create my own problems for a while and try to remember, like, who am I? What am I here for? What am I trying to do? So I have compassion for her, even though this is a messy way to do it. Some of us, we don't know a better way to do it than to do it messy. Yeah, the stickers of the happy planning, and now she just doesn't want to plan. That is so poignant. With the homeschooling, the not working and putting stickers on things as a grown woman, I don't know, it's sad to me. It's sad to me. It's pretty shallow. And I do agree that raising kids and educating kids is total good, noble work, and it's important. But just for her as a person, for her to just feel like, I don't even know what to do with myself. She might need to get her heart broken out there. She might need to have some experiences outside of what's been prescribed for her all her life so that she can figure out who she is. And sadly, the cost of that might be your marriage. But I don't know. You're feeling that everything was great. Here's something that really caught my attention. It was just, as I said, I noticed these incredibly important details came out. It's like, oh, she left, she's just limerent. Oh, well, we had a threesome with the guy. And we left the church right before that. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. So you guys had a collapse of your worldview to do this stuff. And you believed, we're in such a good place, it'll be great. I don't know, I'm hearing sort of a history of denial. And I understand, you're a traumatized kid. We do that, but that's what's working against you here is you're not able to read a woman who's desperately unhappy. You're not able to read that the marriage is not in a good place. I love all the insight that you came up with about yourself. I think you've done an incredible job of that, and you're probably right, it's probably too much. But I love how you've really worked to have insight about what you could have done differently. And so good on you. Whatever happens after this, you having insight and taking responsibility for your pattern and how that would have been hard for her and for you and for the family and for your situation. Yeah, that is noble work. That's a good job. I don't know what she's going to do. This whole thing where she's smoking, gaining a lot of weight, depressed, panic attacks, confused. It sounds like she's in a bad place and that you're still codependent. You're trying to fix your life by trying to pretend that what's going on is limerence, that it's just some fantasy thing. She's gone, dude. She's gone. And that doesn't mean she won't come back, but it's just this is, if she ever does, and I don't think it's very likely, if she ever does, it's got to be on her terms. You've got to let her have things on her terms. And how you do that is not by saying, I'm listening, I'm trying to listen to you, I'm trying to get you to tell me how you feel. Now is the time when you can just go, okay, well, if you want to talk, let me know. Give her that space. And I know it's sad. I mean, this is terrible, losing a wife, and losing a wife when you have 4 kids. It's tragic. But you know what? You're in good company. I did it. Many here did it. And it turned out for the best. It ended up being okay. It's a really hard slog. I think the first year is hard. You're already halfway through it, Frank, and you can do that. But then you said this other thing that was shocking to me. You go, I don't think he's that great. He's a porn addict too. It's wait a minute. So, and then you said they're 2 addicts together. So you calling her an addict, I don't know if you meant drugs, limerence, because she had this history of abusing prescription pills. Yeah, so I guess I didn't read this, but when you first got married, she got super depressed, started taking all these prescription pills, had an affair. The whole thing happened then. I don't know, I can't read her mind and she didn't write in, but if somebody does that right after getting married, I would just say, oh, hold on. It sounds like they spiritually weren't really on board with their own decision for that. And that happens. That happens to young people. It happens to traumatized people. It happens to people who are raised in a super strong, belief system, like it sounds like you two were, where she went along with the program and then something in her was just stop, wait. And next thing you know, the kids. So, yeah, you guys were collapsing from within for a long time. You've both been prescribed these roles. I'm the head of this. Everything's okay. And if you're copying that role as the head of the family guy and then having financial struggles, I would imagine, and people do, lots of people have financial struggles, especially lately. But coupled with that, I'm the head of the family, there's a self-esteem wound right there. So then she's leaving. I don't know. I think you don't know who you are just as much as she doesn't. You guys feel young to me, and that's good. That's good. You're not like all used up and old and it's too late for you. It's not too late. Frank, I think it's time for you to work on your life. It's time for you to learn to let go, to change your pattern that you had from having an alcoholic mom of waiting and hoping and trying to be the good son. From time to time, I recommend this book, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. I love this book. It's really good for men who are trying to fix things by being nice so that the woman won't be mad. That's a toxic dynamic. Sometimes what you got to do is stop worrying about how other people feel, including her, because she's gone, so you're not responsible now. And you just focus on making your life good. If you have a porn addiction, I'm just going to suggest to you, Frank, you put that front and center. I'm glad you tested out CODA. I'm going to suggest you go to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous and deal with that porn addiction. Stop caring about whether the other guy... Well, actually, I would be very upset if my kids were in custody where there was pornography around. I don't know. Some people feel like that's okay or that's contained, but I have a red flag up for both of you. It is a big deal. It's a big deal. It's not a good thing to have in the house with kids, certainly. I don't think it does any favors for marriages, and because you call it an addiction, it suggests that you can't stop. So, this is a very unpopular view, but I, for one, when I wrote down and got clear what I really needed in a spouse, when I really was ready to turn my life around, that was one of the things. No pornography use. Now, for all of you out there who are like, hey, it's no big deal, I like it, no big deal, well, you do what you do, or ask yourself, how's that working for you? But I had had enough experience trying to date men who did have that problem, who are way into it, and they just would totally dissociate. They're not capable of intimacy. It's a very understated problem. A lot of people don't want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. I would not date somebody who did that, and so whether you end up with your wife or, maybe one day you have a new relationship, be a stand-up guy who's totally emotionally available and cancel out this hemorrhage of your emotional energy. Like you really can live without it. So Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous or SA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, those are programs where men can go. I would suggest you go to a men-only meeting and get the best sponsor in the room. So when you said you checked out CODA, or I forget the word you used, I don't know, you didn't say you worked the program. It's a 12-step program. And so you can sort of put your toe in and go, what is this thing, by going to meetings and be acquainted with ideas. But as a 12-step veteran myself, I don't put any stock in anybody who doesn't work all 12 steps with a really good sponsor. Visiting a program is not it. It's weird. I got this very angry email, or not email, but a comment today from somebody who was trying to tell everybody that I wouldn't recommend it to people who have been sexually abused or physically abused. And it's like, oh, like everybody who's drinking? That's very bad advice, by the way, person who said that. Very, very dangerous advice. There are a lot of people who are fragile and they're in a little bit of sobriety, and that's all they need is somebody to BS them. When you're ready to get sober from your addiction, Frank, you will go to any lengths to get help for it. And I don't think that the help for that kind of addiction is available like everywhere. Not all therapists know it. I think some churches take it on, but being together with other men who are working on it themselves, there's no other substitute, and it's free. You have money problems, you got 4 kids now, you got a thing on your hands. So I'm going to ask you to take that seriously and see if you can catch yourself. If you want to also go to CODA or Al-Anon too, for that, whatever you need to do. You had the alcoholic mom. I did 28 years in Al-Anon. I recommend it highly to start understanding the pattern, the difference, the energy that one gets. You sound like an Al-Anon to me. And wherever you find there's really strong fellowship and you resonate, and ultimately the test of whether you're in the right 12-step fellowship is, are you able to help other people there? Are you able to sponsor them? Which would come in time. So yeah, I hear you kind of minimizing her drug use. I hear you minimizing your addiction. I hear you saying they're 2 addicts together. It sounds a little bit like 3 addicts to me. So you get sober. You get sober and you be the dad your kids need right now, regardless of what she does. And you know what? When you clear up your own problems, who knows? You might be a magnet for her. You might find you don't want to be with somebody who's that lost and not dealing with themselves. Or who knows? I'm not trying to take an opinion or judge her or say that I know what's going to happen. I can't read her mind, and I can't read your mind. But from what you've told me, your life is crying for your attention right now. And that's what we do as kids of alcoholics who have this tendency. We will tend to have a hard time seeing our own issues or weighing how serious they are or solving them. We get very, very interested in what are they doing What's their problem? What are they doing? And then thinking that if you could get her to change, your life would be okay. And I'm sure that feels true. And there is some truth in it, but actually you're in a soul crisis of your life, and your choices are falling apart. You can't remember who you are. You've fallen into all these behaviors and you left behind your faith, which you can do if you want. You can go where you want to go. That book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, really emphasizes being friends with men and learning to start developing your own interests in life and not have that driven by the woman in your life all the time. And, I'm a woman, and there's been times I sure wish my husband would just run his whole life by what I want, but that's not actually what I want. It's not attractive, it doesn't work for him, and it doesn't work for me. I love that he has boundaries. I love that he does his own thing. So you can be like that too. So Frank, I wish you luck. You've done a very good job of working on yourself, and I thank you for writing to me. I think people are going to have a lot to say about your story, and I just want to remind everybody that Frank is a hero for all of us for having the courage to share what's really going on in his life so that we could learn from it. You could hear what I had to say about it. You can help each other with it, but please enter into the comments in a spirit of kindness and helpfulness to each other. No judgment. Don't condemn other people. You wouldn't be watching my channel if you were any better than anybody here, okay? We're all in this together. So if you want to hear a very similar dynamic, I have a video called, Are You Gaslighting Yourself? Stop trying to make a bad relationship work by hiding from the truth. I've got that video right here, and I will see you very soon.